Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and esteemed audience, wherever you're from, I hope you are well. Welcome to the Impact Webinar Accelerating Global Hydrogen Production Competency Strategies for Progress. I'm Molly Huang, Head of Content at Leader Associates, and I'm honored to be your host this afternoon. As the world strives for net zero emissions, hydrogen has emerged as a promising solution for decarbonizing hard-to-abate industries. However, scaling up production is no walk in the park. Admittedly, we are caught in a classic chicken and egg dilemma. So how do we crack this challenge and pave the way for progress? Well, fear not, because today we are very fortunate to have an exceptional panel of experts who will provide us with valuable insights from various corners of the globe. To kick off today's agenda, we'll begin with an opening video remark from Mr. José Luis Cabo, representing Spain's Ministry for the Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge. Spain holds a significant position as the European powerhouse and will assume the EU presidency in the later half of this year. Following this video, we'll dive into our live session, starting with Mr. Luis Janeiro, Team Leader and Youth Sector Applications at ARENA Innovation and Technology Center. Then we hear the representatives of the European Commission, Germany, and the Czech Republic to understand the perspectives in the EU context. Furthermore, today's journey will take us to the continents of Oceania and Africa, where Australia and Mauritania have wowed the world with their remarkable strides in hydrogen leadership. While we tap into the wisdom of our speakers, I strongly encourage all of our audience to actively participate in the Q&A session following each of the keynotes, because this webinar is dedicated to you. Today's virtual session is also part of our physical event, Investing in Green Hydrogen 2023, a global platform that unites the entire hydrogen value chain to be taking place in London of UK this September the 14th to 15th. With over 1,500 participants from across 55 countries, including investors, project developers, development banks, financiers, and supply chain stakeholders. The IGH 2023 is your catalyst of business progress. We are privileged to have confirmed notable speakers such as Ms. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General at ARENA, Dr. Christine Falkengrosser, Head of Division Hydrogen from the German Federal Ministry for Energy and Climate, Mr. Peter Merwert, Plenipotentiary of Minister of Industry and Trade for Hydrogen of the Czech Republic, Dr. Sukna Suri, COO Hydrogen at RWE and the Chair of Hydrogen Europe. We are also proud to announce RWE and ENGIE as our energy transition partners and Uniper as our proud platinum sponsor. But let's not delay any further. To begin our webinar, please join me to watch the video from Mr. José Luis Cabo Sánchez, Deputy Director General for Hydrocarbons and New Fuels at Spain's Ministry for the Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge. Please be kindly noted that the video will take approximately 10 minutes. As network varies, should you require a smoother watching experience, we have uploaded video on YouTube. You may find the link below in chat box. And now, let's play the video.
Hi everyone, here José Cabo, Deputy Director General for Hydrocarbons and New Fuels from the Ministry for the Ecological Transition and the Demographic Challenge in Spain. First, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizing committee of this webinar for inviting me as a speaker today. I will try to discuss Spain's practices and strategies for accelerated progress in the development of renewable hydrogen. To provide a comprehensive understanding, I will begin with a short overview of the broader European context, within which Spain plays a significant role. Over the past few years, hydrogen has emerged as a crucial component in energy policies worldwide. The International Energy Agency recognized the significance of renewable hydrogen in achieving a net zero scenario by 2050. Similarly, at the European level, hydrogen assumes a pivotal role in the European Green Deal and the REPower EU plan. The European Union acknowledged that the widespread adoption of renewable hydrogen green ammonia, and other related products will expedite the decarbonization of our energy system while significantly decreasing the EU's reliance on fossil fuels imports. Nevertheless, to fully actualize the potential of the renewable hydrogen sector, it is crucial to establish robust regulations that provide clear foundations to ensure integrity and consistency in the utilization of this new energy vector. This regulatory framework should, of course, encompass various aspects along the entire value chain of renewable hydrogen, starting from its production, which is currently regarded as an industrial activity, to its logistics, distribution through storage facilities or infrastructures, and ultimately its utilization as either a raw material or an energy resource. In light of these developments, significant modifications of existing regulations and the introduction of new regulatory frameworks are underway at the European level under the Fit for 55 initiative. For instance, in February of this year, the Commission adopted two delegated acts mandated by the Renewable Energy Directive. These acts propose rules to precisely define renewable hydrogen in the EU. More recently, in March, the Council approved the general approach for revising the regulatory framework governing the hydrogen and natural gas sector. During the same month, the Commission unveiled the initial plans for the European Hydrogen Bank alongside the proposal for the Net Zero Industry Act. We all may acknowledge that renewable hydrogen stands at the core of the current European energy and industry policies, and it is set to play a leading role during the Spanish presidency of the EU Council coming next semester. To kickstart the 6-month presidency period, we will host an event actually in Madrid, bringing together representatives for EU member states and the European Commission. The primary objective of this gathering is to engage in discussions regarding the current state and future prospect of renewable hydrogen value chains. The event aims to lay the groundwork for upcoming milestones in the hydrogen roadmap, as numerous hydrogen-related initiatives will be promoted during Spain's presidency. During these 6 months, Spain will lead the trilogues for both files within the hydrogen package, the directive and the regulation. Regarding the Net Zero Industry Act, the proposed regulation will undergo discussions and approval by the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union before its adoption and implementation. As for the reform of the electricity market, it is possible that Spain will assume the responsibility of leading the adoption of the general approach or the trilogues. Lastly, concerning the hydrogen bank, the first action to support renewable hydrogen production within the EU is scheduled to take place in autumn 2023. This represents a significant milestone in advancing the production of renewable hydrogen. Now, turning into the national context of Spain, renewable hydrogen holds immense importance in decarbonizing our economy and achieving climate targets. It serves as a viable solution for challenging sectors or processes that are difficult to abate, such as heavy-duty transport and high-temperature industrial processes. Spain, of course, is well positioned to capitalize on the potential arising from a new economy centered around renewable hydrogen. We possess abundant renewable resources, and we have established a robust value chain that is currently prepared to lead the development of this energy vector. Our proactive approach began actually with the implementation of measures across various domains. First and foremost, we took strategic actions by approving our renewable hydrogen roadmap in 2020. While the European hydrogen roadmap aims to achieve 40 gigawatt of electrolysis in 2030, Spain's roadmap sets a target of 4 gigawatt of installed electrolysis capacity by the same year, representing a 10% of the EU objective. With nearly 500,000 tons of fossil hydrogen consumed annually in Spain, 3 exceeds significant potential for rapid and direct decarbonization. In fact, based on the project pipeline within our country, we anticipate surpassing our initial estimate of 20% renewable hydrogen consumption by 2030. Additionally, Renewable Hydrogen Roadmap outlines various other targets for 2030, including the deployment of a fleet of 200 hydrogen fuel cell buses, 150 hydrogen refueling stations, and the establishment of 2 commercial train lines powered by hydrogen, among other objectives. Furthermore, regulatory measures have been introduced to expedite hydrogen development. Some of these measures include the elimination of some of the tariffs to access the electricity grid connecting electrolyzers. We have also regulated the figure of isolated renewable gas grids in order to promote the construction of these infrastructures close to the production sites. And of course, the entry into force past March of a system to guarantee the origin of renewable gases, which includes a registry for facilities engaged in the production of gases from renewable sources. This registry encompasses all renewable gases, including renewable hydrogen. Under this system, each guarantee of origin will represent 1 megawatt-hour of renewable gas produced and will be issued in favor of the gas producer. In addition to planning and regulation, Spain is actively supporting the deployment of hydrogen through the utilization of the Next-Gen funds. In December 2021, the government of Spain approved the so-called PERTE, which is Strategic Projects for Economic Recovery and Transformation, dedicated mainly to renewables, storage, and renewable hydrogen. Under this PERTE, a total of 5 calls for aids associated with renewable hydrogen have been already launched, amounting to 400 million euros. These calls have been garnered significant interest and positive reception from the industry. One of these calls specifically targets to singular pioneer projects, which objective was to provide support for the implementation of integrated hydrogen production, distribution, and consumption projects within the same geographical location. The demand for aid and under this category was 5 times higher than the allocated budget for the call. The remaining 4 calls were focused on boosting the entire value chain of hydrogen. Their purpose was to foster technical knowledge and productive capacity by encouraging advancements in various aspects of the hydrogen value chains. In this case, the requested aid surpassed the budget of the call by a factor of 2. During this spring, all calls for proposals were almost resolved. Notably, the projects awarded through these calls will contribute to the installation of 470 megawatt of electrolyzer capacity across different regions of the country. Furthermore, as part of the PERTE initiative, a dedicated line has been established to support significant projects of common European interest. Spain has demonstrated its leadership and active involvement in the first 2 waves of the important project of common European interest, IPCEI, for hydrogen, namely Hy2Tech and Hy2Use. In the first wave of the hydrogen IPCEI, the European Commission selected a total of 41 projects and Spain contributed 4 projects to this selection. Similarly, in the second wave, Spain's participation remained strong, with 7 projects out of the 35 projects chosen by the European Commission. This second wave, I would like to highlight that the projects collectively account for a significant electrolysis capacity of 1.2 gigawatt. Moreover, Spain is actively participating in the Hy2Move wave, which was pre-notified to the European Commission in last September. This participation signifies Spain's ongoing engagement in the development of hydrogen technologies and their integration into various sectors. Spain's strong presence in this IPCEI wave highlights the country's prominent role in the European hydrogen landscape and reinforces its commitment to driving forward the energy transition and widespread adoption of renewable hydrogen technologies. These were the first hydrogen calls within the PERTE, but we will have more coming in the near future. We are currently working on the rest of instruments, for instance. Given the success of the singular projects line and the amount of aid requested, a new call for increased capacity singular pioneer projects will come shortly. Also, Spain has identified some areas in the country where hydrogen ecosystems could be established and developed benefiting from economies of scale to bring down renewable hydrogen costs. Therefore, we are working on a new funding instrument aimed at the promotion of hydrogen valleys, or how we call it, clusters. More recently, in order to continue taking firm steps toward the development of renewable hydrogen, we created the Renewable Hydrogen Advisory Group to gather the sector's opinion and suggestions. This group will serve as a forum for discussion among the stakeholders involved in the renewable hydrogen sector, with the participation, of course, of the administration, and aiming to identify, coordinate, and prioritize actions to facilitate the adaptation of strategies and regulations to the role of renewable hydrogen in the new energy context. In conclusion, Spain is fully committed to accelerating renewable hydrogen competency and ultimately with the energy and ecological transition. The public sector has the opportunity and responsibility to accompany the private sector in this pursuit. Therefore, we all must create a common front to overcome the barriers and to work in a regulation that allows us to develop the sector as quickly as possible as a response to the national and European ambitions and their power EU objectives. Thank you very much.
What an insightful glimpse into Spain's Remark journey towards hydrogen progress. Once again, our sincere appreciation to Mr. Jose Luis Cabo Sánchez for providing us with such valuable presentation. Now, let's dive into our live session for today. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker on stage, Mr. Luis Janeiro, Team Lead and Youth Sector Applications at IRENA Innovation and Technology Center, as he takes us down the road to hydrogen future. Mr. Luis, now the floor is over to you.
Thank you very much, Molly, and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Leader Associates, for the kind invitation to IRENA to join this webinar. I will be talking today about IRENA's global perspective on the role of hydrogen in the energy transition towards a fully decarbonized energy system, and also touch on some key drivers and trends that we see, how we see international markets for hydrogen playing out in the future, and some potential insights also that may be useful for European audience. Can you move to the first slide? So, starting with the role of hydrogen in a 1.5 scenario, here you can see a breakdown of the final energy consumption in the world in 2020 and in 2050. 2020 on the left-hand side, 2050 on the right-hand side. As you see, fossil fuels dominate the picture today, with roughly 2/3 of the final energy consumption, and electricity accounts for 1/5 of final energy consumption. By 2050, this needs to change radically. This is what you see in the right-hand side of the picture. Fossil fuels are almost fully displaced. Electricity becomes the main carrier in the energy system. And as you see, hydrogen plays a role with about, in our estimation, 14% of final energy consumption in a fully decarbonized energy system in line with the Paris Agreement. This includes, by the way, hydrogen and hydrogen derivatives. And most of this hydrogen, in our perspective, needs to be green hydrogen, renewable-based hydrogen, in order to stay within the Paris boundaries. So you see that hydrogen's contribution is, in quantitative terms, modest. It's certainly not a direct substitute for fossil fuels, and it's not the best substitute for most applications that are solved today with oil and gas. On the other hand, hydrogen will be really essential for some applications for which we don't have solutions, or we don't expect to have solutions by 2050. And I will touch on which are these applications in a minute. Can we move to the next slide? So, and even if we focus in those key applications where hydrogen is needed and adds the most value to the energy transition, we have ahead of ourselves a major challenge in terms of scaling up the production of hydrogen. First of all, it's important to understand that hydrogen today is a decarbonization problem, not a decarbonization solution. It's a major source of emissions. Today, we produce about 100 million tons of hydrogen worldwide, mostly for oil refining, production of downstream chemicals and fertilizers. And almost all of this hydrogen is produced from fossil fuels with unabated emissions. By 2050, we need to change this picture radically. That means scaling up sixfold the production of hydrogen while making that hydrogen clean. Just to give you a sense of the scale of what we are talking about here, just for the production of hydrogen, we would need an amount of electricity comparable to today's total electricity consumption of the world for all applications. That's 21,000 terawatt hours. And in terms of scaling up electrolyzer capacity, we would need 3 orders of magnitude growth from about 1 gigawatt today to almost 6,000 gigawatts in 2050. So we have a very serious challenge ahead of ourselves in terms of scaling up hydrogen. Can we move to the next slide? And precisely because of that big challenge ahead of us in terms of scaling hydrogen, we think, and we give advice to policymakers and other stakeholders, that we need to be very, very selective in prioritizing those applications of hydrogen where it adds the most value to the energy transition. And in this graph, you see a sketch of IRENA's perspective on these priorities along 2 axes, the degree of centralization of the application and the maturity of the technologies. And as you see, we see several applications in which electrification has clear advantages. For instance, that's low temperature heat, even medium temperature heat in some cases, light duty vehicles and trucks. Then there are several applications that fall in a gray area where potentially hydrogen could coexist with a direct electrification. But here it's important to mention that this is not a static picture, and technology evolves very quickly, and this technology deployment will determine whether hydrogen still will play a role in those gray area applications. One example of this is trucks. If we look at the development of battery technology recently, we are increasingly convinced that most of the road transport will be battery electric vehicles rather than hydrogen. So this is a moving picture. On the other hand, you see on the right-hand side, there are several applications that are in the green area where we could call these no regrets applications for hydrogen. And these include the production of some chemicals where hydrogen is part of the feedstock required. So for instance, for the production of ammonia, for the production of methanol. Another application that is key is the production of steel, the reduction of iron ore into metallic iron. We see also potential for synthetic fuels for aviation and shipping, to the extent that biofuels may not be able to cover most of the market, and also for management of variability of solar and wind in power systems, so to produce seasonal storage, medium and long-term storage of power. Next slide, please. Okay, so until here, let's say the size of the challenge and some reservations about how to prioritize the use of hydrogen. Now I would like to bring some good news. And the good news is that the cost of renewables is going down, and it's going down fast. Just to give you a sense of what has happened over the last few years, the cost of solar PV has declined by 85% over the last decade. The cost of wind onshore has declined by 60%, and the cost of wind offshore has halved. And these trajectories, we see still substantial potential for continuation of these cost reductions. Today, solar and wind are the cheapest forms of new power generation in most markets around the world. IRENA manages probably one of the largest databases of real project costs. So we monitor this quite closely. And we see increasingly that it's even cheaper to build a completely new solar plant than to continue paying for the marginal running costs of existing fossil generation assets, coal and gas. So the world and Europe are in a much better position today to adopt renewable technology and to scale it up faster than just a few years ago. And this means decarbonizing faster power supply, decarbonizing faster through electrification most end-use sectors, and then also decarbonizing faster the remaining part of the energy system through indirect electrification with green hydrogen. Next slide. And one key question is whether green hydrogen can become competitive with fossil-based hydrogen. Our answer to that question is yes, if, so with some conditionals. That conditional is that to see the learning that you see in this graph, the cost reduction over time, we will need to deploy renewables capacity as well as electrolyzer capacity at a pace that is compatible with the Paris Agreement. If those deployments happen, then technology costs could decrease dramatically through innovation, economies of scale, optimizations of supply chains, etc. And then you can see the cost reductions that you see in the graph. And under such a scenario, we could see green hydrogen in the favorable locations being competitive with fossil-based hydrogen as soon as in the second half of this decade. Next slide, please. Another key question is where are those locations? And to answer that question, we ran a global model with geographical information data, geographical information systems, and we mixed a lot of information there. So meteorological data, land eligibility. So we excluded protected areas, forest areas with water stress, etc. We also used country-specific parameters like the cost of capital, capex, etc. to determine where green hydrogen production is possible and at what cost is possible. There are a couple of key insights that come out of this. The first is that this will be a very different market to fossil fuels. So with fossil fuels, a handful of countries control roughly 2/3 of the oil and gas reserves. In this case, as you see, the resource is very well distributed around the world, and this will have clear implications for how international markets evolve, and also in terms of the trading volumes. A second insight is that indeed green hydrogen, as I mentioned a minute ago, could be really competitive as we deploy more renewables and more electrolyzers. We see by 2050 cost of hydrogen in the range of $1 per kilogram of hydrogen. In an optimistic scenario, we see as low as $0.65 per kilogram, and in the best locations, and even in pessimistic scenarios, in the best locations, $1 per kilogram. Next slide, please. And if we add up all the potential that you saw in the graph that I just shown, we get a graph like this one, which is a cost supply curve for the production of hydrogen. In the horizontal axis, you see increasing amounts of hydrogen potential, and in the vertical axis, you see the cost of that hydrogen. You also see two lines in the left-hand side. The first one on the left is the total hydrogen demand in a decarbonized scenario in 2050 of 74 exajoules. And the one on the right-hand side is the total primary energy supply in the world in 2050, 614 exajoules. So as you see, the potential for production of hydrogen is roughly 20 times larger than the energy system in 2050. So potential for green hydrogen is not the problem. What is a challenge is that that potential may not be necessarily in the places where we want to consume that hydrogen. There are countries with land availability constraints, and there are countries in which the production will not be competitive compared to neighboring countries or other regions. And this creates this puzzle of demand and supply on how these markets the market for hydrogen will evolve over time. So can we go to the next slide, please? And to gain insights about that puzzle, I'm not sure if you see it, but there should be a world map in the background below all those lines. Hopefully you see it. I cannot see it in my screen. To understand those key trends, we ran a global optimization model to explore how international trade of hydrogen would evolve. And you see the results in this slide. A few key insights. First, we see, looking at cost optimization, that about a quarter of the global hydrogen demand would be traded. The rest would not be traded across borders. Just to give you a sense of the size of this market, this is a quarter of 14% of the energy system that I mentioned before. So it's roughly 3 to 4% of the global energy system. So while being a very significant market, it's nowhere near the volumes of oil and gas today. Out of the hydrogen that will be internationally traded by 2050, in our modeling results, we see roughly half would be traded through regional pipelines. And most of that trade will be concentrated in Europe, actually, because of the existence of an established natural gas network that could potentially be repurposed for the transfer of hydrogen. And the other half will, roughly half, would be shipped. But it will be shipped not as hydrogen, but as ammonia, and to be used as ammonia, as a precursor for fertilizers or as a shipping fuel, potentially. And as I mentioned, the other 3/4 of hydrogen production will be domestically or regionally produced. So this is a very significant departure from fossil fuel trade today, where, for instance, in the case of oil, 3/4 of the oil are traded across borders today. In terms of insights for Europe, we see the main potential trading partners for Europe as North Africa and Middle East. Also, with internal flows within Europe from south to north, that doesn't mean that there's no production in the north. It means that the net flows happen from south to north. And the underlying reason for this is that we see potential for deeper cost reductions for solar PV. So let's say that the green hydrogen produced in the south of Europe with solar PV would outcompete green hydrogen from wind or onshore or offshore in the north of Europe. As I mentioned, this is a cost optimization scenario. So this does not necessarily reflect exactly how markets will play out. Of course, investors take decisions with a broader set of factors beyond cost optimization, like policy risk, infrastructure risk, etc., etc. Maybe one other important insight out of this analysis is that we see that the trade of hydrogen-derived commodities, so products that are produced with green hydrogen, will be more relevant than the trade of hydrogen itself. So we will be trading mostly ammonia, iron produced from iron ore with solar in other jurisdictions, methanol, etc., more than hydrogen itself. That's another key insight that I would like to share. This is maybe if we move to the next slide, and my last slide also. This is something that we continue analyzing. So we are looking more closely at this. How these markets for hydrogen-based commodities will play out in the future. You see here some of our recent work. As you see, we've looked at hydrogen from multiple angles, from a technological perspective, from a policy and, let's say, enabling market conditions perspective, from an innovation perspective, geopolitics. We've looked at it from multiple angles. So feel free to go to our website and find out more. All of these reports are for free in our website. And also, please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. I will direct you to the right people within ERINA. And with this, thank you again for the kind invitation, and looking forward to the next presentation and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luis, for setting the stage for our discussion today. Your expertise and guidance are really invaluable as we navigate the path to a sustainable hydrogen future. And if I may, there are 2 questions from the audience I'd like to ask.
Sure.
So the first one is really about the topic of your session, the scaling issue. In terms of scaling up hydrogen projects, what do you see as the most pressing issue that need to be addressed? For example, someone would argue it's the lack of renewable energy capacity, the lack of electrolyzer capacity, or the infrastructure like storage and transport infrastructure is not mature enough, or someone say it's the prices and the offtake issue. So, of course, these factors are interlinked, but what do you think?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it's a very relevant question. I think all of the elements that you touched on are relevant. The way I look at it is there's two sides of this story of this coin. One is the supply side, the other is the demand side. If we look at the supply side, the limiting factor for the energy transition is ultimately the deployment of the source of energy. So ultimately, we need to deploy renewable power as fast as possible. That's where the hydrogen will come from. So we should never forget that. And there, when we talk to market players, the recurring answer to that question is permitting needs to be accelerated. That's the limiting factor for further deployment of renewables. Of course, there's many other factors, but let's say that's when you are in a situation to accelerate as fast as possible, permitting becomes a key constraint. On the demand side, this is as complex as the supply side. It's about, I would say, it's about policymakers thinking with the mind of the investor, right? So if you're an investor, if you're a policymaker and your policy settings, under your policy settings, you will not invest your own money in a hydrogen project. That means that something needs to change in the policy settings. So this means long-term policy certainty. That means visibility and clarity about that policy. That means clear targets, clear policies to create demand, not only for hydrogen, which I said is going to be relevant, but also more importantly, for what comes after the hydrogen. So for green steel, for green ammonia, green methanol, the actual main uses of hydrogen. I think that's what needs to be clear, that the policies for those key commodities are clear. I think in Europe, actually, Europe is quite advanced in this. There's established carbon price. There's clear, ambitious targets for 2030. There's already discussions about 2040. So in that sense, Europe is in. I would say Europe is in a good situation. And then besides the targets and the policies supporting those targets, I think there's a broader set of conditions that need to happen. And one of them, for instance, which is very important, is the definition of the standards and certification. So what is green steel? What is green ammonia? So that investors can invest with clarity, that there will be a framework that will, let's say, recognize the low carbon product with its attributes. That's a bit what I would answer to your question.
Thank you. And the question number 2 is, what is the current level of adoption for hydrogen projects, and have project owners discovered effective solutions to overcome financial constraints? As we know, as we all know, the final investment decision rate is currently low in the market. And in your opinion, what might be the low-hanging fruits that we can solve this situation?
There's reasons to be optimistic and pessimistic. So let's say if we look at starting with the pessimistic, we see that only a small fraction of projects are actually converting to actual construction of projects or reach final investment decision. That's, let's say, the concerning side of it. On the optimistic side, we've seen a very strong growth of hydrogen projects over the last couple of years. There's hundreds of projects around the world now with substantial amounts of hydrogen production under discussion. I would not say committed. And I would say another positive element is that most of those projects, the last time I checked, it was something around 95% of the projects are actually green hydrogen projects. So that shows I think where the market is going. With regards to whether there's innovative financial solutions, I don't think that's that comes back to the first question, ensuring demand and ensuring that the project is bankable. And I think in some jurisdictions that will be more challenging than others. I think in Europe we are moving quite fast in that direction. Other jurisdictions are going behind, but in the end, it's ultimately about bankability of projects. And the bankability is, as I said before, is about ensuring that you as an investor would invest your own money if that is in place, that's probably a good framework for investing in hydrogen projects.
Thank you so much, Ms. Luis. With regards to the investment and the financial topics, I guess our following speakers will provide more insights on that. But once again, thank you so much, Ms. Luis, for joining us. And as I can see, there are still some questions in the Q&A box. I would appreciate if you can stay a little bit longer to address this.
Sure.
Thank you. And now let's welcome our next distinguished guest, Ms. Avelina Daniel, Policy Officer at the DG Climate Action and the Innovation Fund of the European Commission. She will be enlightening us about the must-know facts regarding the 2023 Innovation Fund pilot auction. Ms. Avelina, now the floor is over to you.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me well?
Perfect.
And fantastic. And how about the presentation? Can you see that already as well?
We can see it, but it's not in the full screen mode.
Yes, but if you bear with me, I will try to make it as big as possible. Still, I just that it goes a bit easier for me to change the slide. I would leave it like that if you don't mind. Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. So yes, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me at this event. Big pleasure. I will be speaking about Innovation Fund pilot auction for the renewable hydrogen, which is exactly one of these instruments which aims to increase bankability of the renewable hydrogen projects. My name is Avelina Daniel. I work for the European Commission. I don't think in a very short time I would be able to give comprehensive overview of all the European policies that we have for the renewable hydrogen. I very much liked the previous presentations with this holistic overviews, but well, many of the participants will know we have the targets for renewable hydrogen. We have financial instruments, one of them supporting renewable hydrogen, one of them is Innovation Fund. Of course, there is also the price signal coming from the carbon market, research programs. By now we have a pretty holistic set of instruments in support of the renewable hydrogen. So yes, I will focus today on the pilot auctions because it is a relative novelty which was announced in March this year. So in March this year, we had announcement, we had so-called European Hydrogen Bank communication, but this announcement actually went a little bit back in time to 2022. It appeared in the State of the Union of our Commission President. So then it was mentioned for the first time as a tool to help us to achieve the very ambitious targets on the renewable hydrogen, this 20 million tons of renewable hydrogen by 2030, half imported, half produced in the EU. And then, well, it took some time to flesh out this concept in more detail. And in March this year, we were able to come up with a complete communication. That was together with the Net Zero Industry Act, so sort of reaction from the EU side to the US IRA. So we had this initiative, and then already in the European Hydrogen Bank communication, we presented the key modalities of the first pilot auction. It was already confirmed that it will be financed from the Innovation Fund. I will speak shortly about the Innovation Fund. And the timing was confirmed, which is already autumn this year. Currently, where we are with the implementation is that we are finalizing the stakeholder consultation. This initiative is a major innovation on the EU level. It will be the first time that really auctions are held under EU funding programs. Of course, we have auctions at the carbon market, but not under the funding program. So it is a major innovation for us. We are doing that for the first time on the EU level. We do it on the renewable hydrogen, which is only a nascent market, as previous speakers were explaining. This is why we held quite lengthy stakeholder consultation to make sure that it is an attractive tool that we'll be proposing. I need to give you a bit of basics on the Innovation Fund. Why are we doing that under Innovation Fund? Well, Innovation Fund is relatively young funding instrument on the EU level. It is one of a kind, if I may say, because it's not financed from the EU budget, but it is financed from the carbon market. So part of the EU ETS allowances, which are traded, a number of them is earmarked for the operation of the Innovation Fund. And to put the principle of Innovation Fund in a nutshell, the sectors which are covered under emission trading system, they can also benefit from the Innovation Fund. Now, type of the projects which can benefit is quite special in a sense that it's not the research, it's not the commercial deployment, full-scale commercial deployment. It is the innovative part. It is first of a kind commercial deployment, second of a kind, large demonstration, and the scale up, which goes before the mass commercialization. So we exactly with this instrument want to come to this place, which is often called Valley of Death, between the research and the commercialization. Therefore, only some of the projects which are currently being deployed would be eligible for the Innovation Fund. But I must say that program is very attractive, so we do see demand for this kind of projects. Making reasonable assumptions on the carbon prices for the current decade, we expect to have a budget for the current decade of the 40 billion euros. And then with this 40 billion euros every year, we are having calls for proposals, providing grants for large-scale projects, small-scale projects. And from this year onwards, we will be also having auctions, which, well, they will be different than regular calls because the competition will happen on the price rather than having standard multi-criteria assessment. Of course, this is the instrument from European Commission Directorate General Climate Auction. The objective is to avoid emissions, but like I said before, avoid them by deploying innovative projects. Of course, projects which are financed by Innovation Fund, they cannot solve it all, but they are supposed to be the trailblazers, the front runners to inspire other projects. Now the last slide on the Innovation Fund, just to show that we do have some credentials on the renewable hydrogen, so to say, because even though we are being relatively young program, we already had 2 large-scale call for proposals, and we have seen a number of hydrogen projects coming to Innovation Fund, which were aiming at the quite significant scale of electrolyzer capacity to be deployed. You can see that on the map on the slide. So yes, today's state of the art in terms of electrolyzers, well, is measured in terms of the size. So you can see that with the size going from 100 to 500 megawatts, we are going beyond the state of the art. So indeed, all those projects could argue the innovative aspects, and there were many of them. Here I'm showing you the pipeline, not all the projects that were awarded. Like I said already before, we are an attractive program and the competition is quite intense. So with those credentials, knowing already a bit about the hydrogen projects, and in line with the political priorities of the European Commission, we go for the pilot auctions on the renewable hydrogen. Why auctions? Well, because we think that hydrogen is ready for what renewables in power have. So the auctions as an instrument of awarding the support, as a mechanism for awarding the support. And what we expect from the auctions? Well, that the support will be cost efficient because there will be competition for the amount of subsidy per kilo of renewable hydrogen produced. We also think that not everything should be financed from the public money. So with this subsidy, we can also leverage private investment. We can de-risk the project so that they become attractive for the commercial lenders. We also think as a public authority that we can have a price discovery. So knowing what are the winning strike prices, we have a very valuable information for the market about the cost of hydrogen production. And therefore, we will contribute to the market formation with this information, just like many of you will remember the first auctions on offshore wind. the information which was coming from them about the winning prices, about the strike prices that won, they were very precious information for the creation of the market, for the whole policy reflection. I was doing similar job as the previous speaker, also working on modeling. They were even serving as modeling inputs for running the energy system models. So yes, they were widely used. What we also hope immediately is reduce administrative burden. It is one thing to monitor the project in terms of its holistic development. It is another to simply monitor the goods that it produces and pay on their delivery. So how should it look like, this pilot auction? Really, if we put ourselves in the shoes of potential project applicant. Well, we will have a call for proposal, just like we have them always under the EU funding programs. This call for proposal should open in December. Then the bidders will be submitting the material, qualifications material, and the bids. So the bids will be expressed in terms of price. I will explain in a second the construction of the bid, and also some material to judge the seriousness of this bid. Of course, we don't want speculative bidding. We don't want projects which exist only in PowerPoint. There must be a degree of seriousness that we will be checking based on the MOUs signed on the power purchase, on the hydrogen offtake agreements, on procurement of electrolyzer. In a nutshell, I will go in more detail soon. Then those qualifications will be checked by the executive agency of the Commission, CINEA. And then for those which pass pre-qualifications, we go for a pure ranking on the price, and therefore auction can be cleared. Once we have the winners, so those which can be covered by the budget, which is already earmarked for this first pilot auction, we will be awarding those bidders and then publishing this information. So there should be a transparency about the winning bids, about the projects which won, and then there will be the signature of the we call it grant agreement, because even though it is support which is provided during the operational phase, it is still a grant under our terminology for the EU funding programs. Then there will come the waiting time for the construction of the project, and finally project enters into operation, is constructed, and can start they can start production of the renewable hydrogen, and they receive support in function of produced renewable hydrogen. It will be a fixed support. I will explain soon why. So per kilo of renewable hydrogen produced, there will be a payment, and this payment was determined in the auction by comparing the bids submitted by different applicants. Should it not go according to the plan, project was never constructed, or it fails to produce renewable hydrogen, or it fails to certify even that it is renewable hydrogen, then we might be brought to termination of the grant agreement or some other form of penalties. So here is the graph which illustrates very nicely how we conceive the necessary payments, the necessary subsidy. So we consider that every project developer knows the levelized cost of hydrogen, mostly composed in a larger share composed by OPEX, in a smaller one by CAPEX. They can express it in euros per kilogram of hydrogen. And this is, of course, specific for renewable hydrogen. Then this cost is partly met by the revenues from the market. So the offtake agreements that they will be themselves able to secure. And when we will be checking the pre-qualifications, projects coming to the auction, we would like to see the evidence of some pre-contractual relations already with off-takers in the form of memorandum of understanding or letter of intent. So part of the cost can be recovered already directly from the market. Now, we of course understand that if the yellow bar was matching the entire levelized cost of hydrogen, we would have nothing to do. The projects don't need any public support, but this is not the case today. Almost all renewable hydrogen projects, they face either what you call funding gap or the green premium, definitely a gap in the revenue. And this is on this gap of the revenue, we want to intervene, we want to finance that, but not on a simple declaration. This is the gap that needs to be covered by the public subsidy, but based on the outcome of the auction. So imagine that there would be a number of applicants coming to the auction. Here I go to the second graph, and all of them coming with this turquoise rectangle, they will be competing on the amount of subsidy needed. And then we rank them from the smallest amount of subsidies, from the smallest bid to the highest, and we clear them in function of the budget that we have. And of course, the fact that different amount of subsidy can be requested for a different volume of production. We welcome smaller projects, we welcome medium projects, we welcome bigger projects. We only consider establishing minimum threshold for the electrolyzer capacity of 5 megawatts, simply to make sure that we have administrative capacity to deal with all the bids. So this is really those two graphs illustrate best, I think, the mechanics of our auction. Now a bit more on the detail. So the budget that we currently have will be 800 million. This was already decided long time ago in function of what we want to do also on our regular grants under Innovation Fund, in function of the current carbon price. The auction good for sure renewable hydrogen, even though there were some heated discussions with the stakeholders if the definition should be broader to low carbon hydrogen. But with this amount of budget and with the political priorities we have today, it is renewable hydrogen. Then again, a subject of very intense discussions, it will be a fixed premium. So this turquoise rectangle in terms of subsidy provided will be constant in time. There were initial ideas to go for the contracts for difference, but very quickly we got a feedback from stakeholders that hydrogen market is not ready for that. For starters, we don't have pan-European hydrogen reference price, so it would be very difficult to make contract for difference. Plus, it is a nascent market. There is uncertainty about all those projects. Banks don't really welcome them with open arms immediately. So what they need is a stable source of revenue, not the one fluctuating, but stable, which can be counted upon in 10 years' time. So based on this stakeholder feedback, which was very strong, we go for fixed premium, and we will do it over 10 years of time. Bids will be ranked on price. There are no price criteria, as currently is practiced in many renewables auctions, but we are not yet there. We want to have simple mechanism. It will be output-based support, meaning what I described before, payment will be upon volumes of hydrogen produced and certified as renewable, not as is very often the practice with EU funding programs, with the pre-financing, with financing the construction phase. No, the first disbursement happens after the first period of production, which likely will be the first 6 months. What we also discussed a lot with stakeholders was maximum realization period. Here on the slide, you have 3.5 years for entry into operation. We received very strong feedback that this might be too ambitious. There are many items outside the control of the project developers in terms of permitting, procurement of electrolyzers. We are willing to listen to those concerns and extend this period when we have the final terms and conditions for the auctions. For the key qualification requirements, I have already touched upon that. It is checking how serious the project is, or even more precise, is this project serious enough that we can trust it, that it will happen, that the electrolyzer will be constructed and will deliver the hydrogen to its off-takers. So we are checking power purchasing agreements, hydrogen offtakes, electrolyzer delivery, what's happening with the permit, what's happening with grid connection. All of this, we don't expect the real contracts yet signed, but more evidence of pre-contractual relation based on MOU letter of intent. And in addition, we ask for a bank guarantee to guarantee that the project will be constructed. If it is not, bank guarantee will be called by the implementing agency, so the money will be lost on the part of the project, on behalf of the project developer. This is quite a standard practice in auctions. And because we go only for those 5 bullet points that I'm presenting, there is no more lengthy application to be filled in with the description of the projects, with the strategy, in the business plan, as would be quite often a practice under other EU funding programs, as is the practice under the Innovation Fund current grants. Now we go to the auction procedure. It will be a static auction. Pay as bid, very simple rules. We are only doing that for the first time. Ceiling price of 4 euros per kilogram of hydrogen. Attention, this is not a ceiling price on the levelized cost of hydrogen production. It is a ceiling price on the subsidy, on the amount of subsidy needed. Completion bond, I already explained. Maximum realization period as well. So should there be any issue with those with construction, completion bond is called. If there is an issue, meaning electrolyzer is not constructed, the project doesn't come online, maximum realization period exceeded in this sense, then completion bond is called. There could be also other, but very few termination reasons, notably severe underproduction. So yes, electrolyzer was constructed, but it fails to produce. And then very quickly over this slide, one of the conditions to participate in the auction will be also not to accumulate with previous or future public funding for the same project. So if this project has already received public funding, be it on CapEx or OpEx, this won't be possible because that would have tilted the level playing field among the projects very much. And we don't want it in our pilot auction. We also consider that there is a sufficiently big pool of projects mature enough to come to our auction. Therefore, we want the competition on many other factors, but not whether the other sources of public support were secured. Conversely, if a manufacturer of electrolyzer benefited from the public support, it is okay. If earlier stages of the project, in a sense, research benefited from public support, this is fine. If feasibility study were financed, this is fine. So plenty of cases are okay, but not those which would have substantially skewed the competition. Almost last slide from me. It is additional idea attached to the pilot auction for renewable hydrogen, which is called auction as a service. Yet another innovation from the Innovation Fund. So considering that the budget of the Innovation Fund is pretty limited, and we all know how big investment challenge is for the renewable hydrogen, we consider opening the auction to member states' contributions, the European member states. Meaning, we would open the auction. First, we clear the projects with the Innovation Fund budget up until this budget is exhausted. And then, if 1, 2, or more member states would like to participate, we continue to clear the projects, but only those which would be located in this member state. Imagine this is the French budget. So we have already cleared with the Innovation Fund a number of projects that will be financed from the Innovation Fund. Imagine that there is additional budget from France. Then the next project on the supply curve, well, it's a Spanish one. No, we cannot take it with the French budget. But the one after is the French one. So yes, it can be cleared. And the one after is also French. So yes, it can be cleared. Then again, projects come which are located elsewhere. And at some point, the French budget is also exhausted. And we have a number of projects which we identified for award. We pass this information to the French government, and then they sign the contracts, they monitor the projects. So it is offering member states, especially if they have a smaller administrative capacity. So in this regard, France is not the best example. If they have smaller administrative capacity, we offer design which is already developed, which took us quite some time to develop, make sure that it works for stakeholders, for market players, and we allow it to be used to award additional projects in a given country with a budget from this given country. we will see how it works, if there is an interest already for the pilot auction, or it will take more time and comes later. So this is it. In terms of a concept, we are currently finalizing this economic design that I was describing based on the stakeholder feedback. We hope that we will be able to publish that at latest in September. And then as of September, project applicants can already start to prepare their bids, whereas the auction itself will open in December and most likely close pretty fast in 2 months' time. Which with all the winds blowing in the right direction should enable us to award the projects by mid of next year. This is it from me. We have a dedicated website. You have it referenced on this slide. We have also dedicated email address. I would be very happy, of course, to answer the questions coming to this mailbox or right now at our event. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Daniel, for sharing those enlightening facts about the Innovation Fund pilot auction. The interest is certainly strong, as I can see from the Q&A box. There are already 4 questions lining up. I will try to combine them in 1 or 2. So the first question is really about the pricing. So we have a question from Nicholas Gold asking, will all winning projects be given a subsidy equal to the clearing price, or are the premiums provided to each project unique based on their bid? And also, we have one question from Mr. Sivan Parko. Is there a lower limit of H2 production quantity to participate at the auction? And question number 3, regarding the floor price, as you mentioned, that the selling price of this auction is around €4. What about the ground price, the floor price?
Very good question. Thank you very much, and I'm glad to hear that there is interest in the initiative. Yeah, okay. First of all, in terms of minimum production, no, we don't think about such limit, minimum production volume, but in a way it comes from the minimum electrolyzer capacity. I'm not sure I put it on the slides, but I think that I mentioned that. For administrative reasons, we think to put the floor at the 5 megawatt capacity, so take electrolyzer from certain size, which will inevitably translate into a level of the production, but we don't want to be prescriptive on the load hours whatsoever. So up to project developer to see that. So that is one. Second, on the ceiling prices and possible on the ceiling prices and pay as bid or pay as clear. So the ceiling price, which is, like I say, on the amount of subsidy, it means that if need for subsidy is bigger than this, there's no point to come to the auction, because we won't be awarding beyond this ceiling price. This is also a very good and well-established practice from the renewables auctions. Now, in terms of award, there will be prices at which auctions clear, and we will go for pay as bid. So exactly the price proposed by applicant will be the price if it was cleared, if project was awarded because it was one of the bidders going with the smallest price, then this is the price that they will be receiving, not the pay as clear. So one clearing price which applies to everybody. We consider that a neater instrument. Bidders know exactly what subsidy they are applying to. There is no possibility of additional rent depending where they are on the supply curve and when we have the clearing price. So that's it. And maybe that allows me just to make connection with the US IRA. We actually think that with our mechanism, we are very similar to the tax credits provided in the US, because the payment will be per kilo of renewable hydrogen for a long period of time. It will be a fixed premium. Where we are different is that first the bidding has to happen. So once the project is awarded, they know for sure amount that they will be receiving, but before that comes the competition. Did I miss anything from the 3 questions? I hope that I answered them all.
Yes, you answered it perfectly, but still there are more questions in the Q&A box, and I would appreciate to have you stay longer to address all of them. For example, asking about the auction time, if it's confirmed, regarding the technologies accessible to this auction, etc.
Absolutely. I will stay a bit longer and try to answer in writing on the chat box. In terms of technologies, there is no choice of ours. It is all technologies which can take us to production of the renewable hydrogen in line with the definitions that we have in the Renewable Energy Directive and its delegated acts.
Thank you so much, Ms. Evelina, for your very kind address. And moving forward, our journey
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now takes us to Germany. And please join me to welcome Ms. Frederick Alge, Team Leader for Hydrogen Markets and Regulation at the German Energy Agency. Ms. Frederick, now the floor is yours.
Thank you, Molly. So it's a pleasure to be here to share some insights on our analysis of the global funding landscape and the German funding instruments. So while we wait for the slides, a few words on the German Energy Agency. We are a public company owned by the German government with about 500 employees working on advancing the energy transition nationally and globally in different divisions and different areas. I lead our team on hydrogen markets and regulation. And if we could go to the next slide. A brief overview of our activities on renewable hydrogen and its derivatives. We've published a number of studies and reports on the topic, including our own modeling studies to illustrate the possible future demand for renewable hydrogen in a fully decarbonized energy system. We run a number of platforms and alliances that work on advancing the market for renewable hydrogen and its derivatives. We've also established a blockchain-based certification system for hydrogen together with our partners at Siemens Energy and TÜV Süd, and also work on the issue of decentral hydrogen hubs. In addition, we implement international energy partnerships and dialogues with a focus on hydrogen on behalf of the German government and the German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. And this includes partnerships in different countries, with the examples here on the slides being Turkey and France, but our activities are not limited to those countries. Next slide, please. So when we speak about renewable hydrogen and its derivatives, we usually use the term power fueled, which for us is a term that embraces a broad range of technologies, which include renewable hydrogen as well as all its derivatives, such as synthetic gas, so methane, propane, for example, as well as synthetic liquid fuels and chemicals like methanol, diesel, kerosene, ammonia, or other Fischer-Tropsch products. Next slide, please. With one of our initiatives, the Global Alliance Power Fueled, we published an energy system modeling study titled Power Fuels in a Renewable Energy World back in 2020, together with the Finnish LUT University. And this study revealed that in a carbon neutral, cost optimized energy system, all main Power-to-X products will contribute to meeting final energy demand. And as you see here, the share of power fuels as part of the total final energy demand globally is higher in our study than in the numbers shared with Irina before. But note that this again is a modeling study based on a fully renewable energy system by 2050. The study also highlights the urgent need for direct investments towards power fuels, as well as towards dedicated renewable electricity plants and direct air capture plants to provide CO2 for carbon-based power fuels. So how much will this transition cost exactly? The study finds that the upstream investments needed to reach these volumes of power fuels, including the cost to capture and use sustainable CO2, so for example, from direct air capture, are very close to the cost of sustaining oil and natural gas demand at 2020 levels in the same time frame in a business as usual scenario. As another example of one of the reports we recently published, this is a report on global funding for power fuels projects, which we published just a month and a half ago. So we first started compiling a database on public funding instruments for power fuels projects back in 2021 to provide an overview of the funding landscape. And then, of course, over the past year, the development of power fuels projects and government hydrogen strategies as well gained additional momentum, in part because of the attention paid to the IRA in the US. So we updated our funding database and published a follow-up report in April this year, which now captures the changes in the funding landscape since the summer of 2021, and also gives some updated policy recommendations. The number of programs that are included in our database and analyzed in the report increased from 116 to 224 in this time frame, and the volume of included programs more than tripled from 200 billion to over 660 billion. However, it's important to note that not all of this funding is dedicated to power fuels projects, but this is the total volume of the programs that we included and that for which power fuels projects are eligible for funding. In addition, the report also offers a deep dive into 5 selected programs. So that includes the IRA, but also the Innovation Fund that we just heard more of, for example. Next slide, please. So just some insights into our results and the numbers we found. Again, as mentioned, the total funding volume that's included in the database increased significantly to over 660 billion euros. And we see that most of the funding is now dedicated to market deployment, which is linked, of course, to the maturing market. So while in the previous database, funding was more level across the different project stages, it increased most relatively for market deployment activities. We also looked at the share of funding that goes to CAPEX and OPEX, and see that OPEX funding increased from 9% to 22%, and the share of loans in the total number of funding provided also increased from 8% to 27%. Next slide, please. What we also looked at was the distribution of funding, both in volume and in number, by the different regions and countries. So if we include the EU as a funding body, in terms of the total volume of funding included in our database, the EU still leads by far, and this has to do with a number of very large funding programs such as Horizon Europe, the Recovery and Resilience Fund, Innovation Fund, and Next Generation EU, for example, which again don't only provide funding for power fuels projects, but for which hydrogen and other derived products are eligible. And when we only compare countries, then Germany leads in the number of in the volume of funding ahead of the United States. However, the US are the country that has witnessed the highest increase in the volume of funding over the 1.5 years period that we analyzed. Next slide, please. Now comparing the regions and countries by number of funding programs, Germany leads, which is due to a very granular funding structure in the country and many regional programs that are in place, followed by the US. And then we see that the number of countries overall which do have programs in place in which hydrogen projects can be funded also increase significantly, but many countries only have a very limited number of programs which can provide funding for power fuel. Next slide, please. Coming now to the German strategy and German instruments, as many of you will know, Germany has set quite ambitious targets in its national hydrogen strategy that was first published in 2020 and is currently under review. So a key target of the German government is to make green hydrogen competitive by 2030 and also to establish domestic electrolyzer capacities of 10 gigawatts by 2030. This goal was revised in the current government coalition agreement and was before set at 5 gigawatts. The national hydrogen strategy expects a demand of 90 to 110 terawatt hours of hydrogen by 2030. And this, of course, will largely have to be covered by imports. It is therefore also not surprising that significant shares of funding are also provided to ramp up imports and strengthen international partnerships. Next slide, please. Here's now an overview of the different funding programs that are available for international projects. This is a decision guide that we worked on behalf of the German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. Of course, as you see, the funding landscape in Germany is quite complex, but this is, was aimed to help companies navigate the funding landscape. Basically, this decision guide is based on different pathways of funding. The first one on the left side highlights instruments that are available for companies that plan to export renewable hydrogen or derived products into the EU. Then on the second path on the right, this is more demand side oriented for companies planning to implement projects abroad. So countries outside the EU. And the color coding also distinguishes between the different funding mechanisms and includes not only direct funding programs, but also, for example, foreign trade support and support from financing institutions or banks such as the KfW Development Bank in Germany. Next slide, please. So to just give a very short outlook on the way forward and our recommendations. What our overview shows is that funding across all project stages and value chain steps is still needed. The database shows a gradual shift away from R&D funding towards market deployment, which of course reflects an increasing maturity of the market. But in our view, research and development funding remains important for certain power field technologies at lower technology readiness levels. And what's also important to note is that hydrogen infrastructure development is currently particularly underfunded and will need to be integrated more closely into the existing programs. When it comes to the design of the program, as mentioned, an increasing number of funding schemes cover OPEX now, but they still only make up 22% of the total volume of the programs. And as of course, OPEX are the most relevant cost component with increasing scale of the project, it will be essential to shift funding further towards it. On other policy instruments that can complement direct public funding, of course, the definition and certification of power fuels is key to establish regulatory certainty, and especially in the EU, we've seen advancements here over the past couple of months. What's also important to note is that, of course, different market-based instruments such as carbon pricing or energy taxation are also important contributors to closing the cost gap. And finally, we still find that funding programs are very much concentrated in the global north, but many countries in the global south are positioning themselves as future exporters. So there is still a challenge there to attract funding due to higher risk ratings, for example, and funding programs will have to look into this. And we see that instruments that also address this gap and aim to incentivize export-oriented projects are also on the rise. With that, I'd like to thank you, and please do reach out for any additional questions.
Thank you, Ms. Jen, for that very comprehensive assessment of the overall global funding trends. And I have one question for you, if I may. So during your presentation, there are two figures, I would say. The number one is, as your estimation, that globally, we expect to have 180 trillion euro funding gap by 2050. And so far globally, we have 224 funding programs. So the question is, how well do you believe the funding programs cover the needs of project developers, and what gaps remaining in the funding landscape?
Yes, so as you rightly mentioned, there still is a large funding gap, and it's very clear that public funding instruments cannot cover it fully. So one role of direct public funding is, of course, also to bring in private capital and to attract investors from the private sector. So what we analyzed in our report was also how the development of the funding programs coincided with the development of project activities, and that's of course something that was also shared by ARENA in their presentation. So we do see that the steep increase in funding went hand in hand with an increase in announced projects, but not at the same level or scale, which is of course not surprising, given that funding instruments will only lead to projects being developed later in time. So that's, I think, one insight. Another one would be, as I mentioned, that the design of funding programs will have to adapt to the developing market. So I think market-based instruments and auction-based designs, such as those presented by the European Commission before, are a positive development there. And again, a few funding programs are currently dedicated to hydrogen infrastructure development. I think that's another area where we would need to see additional movement.
Thank you so much, Ms. Algert, for a very kind address. And now we shift our focus to the Czech Republic, where hydrogen policies and regulation are playing a vital role in expanding its green hydrogen industry. Joining us today is Mr. Peter Murat, Plenipotentiary of the Ministry of Industry and Trade for Hydrogen of the Czech Republic. The floor is now over to you, Ms. Peter.
Okay, so hello, good afternoon from my side, good afternoon from the Prague. And I would like to talk a little bit about our experience with the upgrade of our hydrogen strategy. We spent some time on development of new version of hydrogen strategy to reflect all the changes. So actually, can I ask you for my slides? These were the slides which were shown before. So we are working on the update.
Yes, please.
So we are working on the upgrade of our strategy, and our original thought was that, that's it. And our original thought was that we will do something like evolution of the original text, that we will a little bit brush it off. We will change some technologies. We will, let's say, change some nitty-gritty things, and it will be like that, and update some figures, put inside some regulations from European Commission. But in the discussions we realized that the real process is slightly different. So that according to our present opinion, it seems that the hydrogen will not be developed, or the progress will not go in, let's say, clean, linear evolution, but it will be done in some disruptive changes. And we identify, so next slide, and we identified about 3 next steps which will change situation, and it's really like a changing the train. So at the very beginning we need to start with some local train which is not as fast, which is not as convenient, and in one stage we need, let's say, to leave that train and to jump to something different, to Pendolino or to some intercity train. And hopefully afterward, again, after some time, we need to jump to another vehicle, which should be hopefully some Shinkansen or something very fast, neat and convenient. And only these, let's say, the third train is able to bring us to our ultimate goal, which is carbon-free economy and the reduction of CO2 emissions. If we go to the next slide, I can discuss what these trains means in the reality. We realize that we have something like 3 stages. The first stage could be called something like a local islands. And these local islands means that the hydrogen production will be heavily dependent on renewable resources. Here in the Czech Republic, maybe we will do some, let's say, processing of organic waste, or to use some low carbon electricity for production of hydrogen. But everything will be done in small locations. And it means that also the transport of hydrogen and usage of the hydrogen should be done as possible in the place where the hydrogen will be produced. Because to have some effective transport, we need to make sure that the hydrogen is not transported for bigger distance than 150 kilometers. And it means that the scale and the number of applications which can be used for that kind of hydrogen is limited. It's mostly for mobility, for chemical industry, for utilization of some renewable surpluses, and for blending with natural gas. And what's important is that in Czech conditions, we are not able to get under the price of 8 euros per kilogram hydrogen, because we have only limited resources of sunshine, limited resources of wind, and this defined utilization of devices and this defined number of hours of sunshine, it's pretty difficult to break that price. And even it will be the task for our government, for our ministries and state organizations to really pave the way to that price, so to make sure that our producers will be able to reach that price of 8 euros per kilogram. On the other hand, this price is not for general use of renewable hydrogen. So we need to find a way how to decrease the price. And the only one solution is to really jump into that second train, which we call global bridges. It means that we need to use renewable resources in countries where they have surplus of renewable resources. Definitely the countries of South Europe, maybe East Europe, North Africa. But on the other hand, it means that we need to have some effective transport. And the only one way how to transport the hydrogen effectively is by pipelines. It's also an advantage for the Czech Republic because we already have some pipelines which are today used for natural gas, and these pipelines can be repurposed for transport of hydrogen. But nevertheless, even if we have tubes, we need to have a production at the very beginning of these tubes. So we are discussing a couple of options. We are talking with some other countries, and we are looking for, let's say, sources of hydrogen, renewable hydrogen productions, which can start as soon as possible and which can be connected to our pipelines. We expect that with that production in the countries with a high surpluses of renewable resources, we should be able to get to the price of about 4 euros per kilogram of hydrogen. It means that with that price, we can dramatically increase the number of applications where that hydrogen can be used. It's again mobility, chemical industry, some specific heat production, and it could be used in some specific industries. On the other hand, we still have a problem because in Europe we are talking a lot about the resilience, and if we are starting with an import of hydrogen from other countries, and in many cases from countries out of Europe, it's not good for improving of Europe resilience. So we still need to look for some options how to produce our low carbon or renewable hydrogen on site here in Europe. On the other hand, with hydrogen, with renewable hydrogen, definitely we have advantage that there is much more countries all over the world when that renewable hydrogen can be produced than the countries when we can get natural gas. So still we have more variety of countries, and we have more options from where to import it. But nevertheless, to increase our resilience, we should still look for some options how to produce low carbon or renewable hydrogen here in Europe. We call it that third train, the emerging technologies. And what we have on the radar now is using of geothermal energy, and second option is to use some combined production of electricity, heat, and hydrogen using high temperature split and using by nuclear energy. That case, we should be able to get up to 2 euros per kilogram. But on the other hand, I must say that these technologies are still under development, and it will take some time to get them. And it's still questionable if these technologies will, let's say, fulfill its premises. But if this happens, we could resolve a lot of issues, and with hydrogen with a price tag 2 euros per kilogram, we can apply it in all the technologies. We can use it for the production of the heat, and we can use it even for production of electricity in the peaks where we are not able to cover the consumption from the renewable resources. So these should be general option, but there are still 10-15 years to reach that options. So on the next slide, we should discuss also the advantages of import of hydrogen through the pipelines. As you can see in the Czech Republic, we have something like a triangles of these pipelines for natural gas, which can be repurposed for hydrogen. And if we use that triangle, which is going from the border on one side from the border on Slovakia to border with Bavaria and Saxony, with Germany, we are able to have some hubs, some, let's say, hydrogen distribution hubs on these pipelines, and afterward, nearly the whole area of the Czech Republic is in the distance of 150 kilometers from that. So it means that it's relatively easy to transport the hydrogen, and with that scheme of let's say core gas transport network, we are able also to start some local distribution networks for the hydrogen, which can really boost the using of the hydrogen. And on the other hand, also all the hydrogen producers could be connected to that core gas transport network. So it will make the usage and the production of hydrogen much more effective. So let's go to the next slide, because if we are talking about the usage of hydrogen, we see, and actually making a small joke about that at the end, we have only 3 small issues to resolve. The first one is cost of the hydrogen production. The second one is cost of the hydrogen transport. And the third one is cost of the hydrogen technologies. In reality, with hydrogen, a lot of things seems very easy, because for everybody is production of hydrogen a relatively simple task. Everybody have seen that, let's say, school experiment with a battery and water and 2 wires, which are put into the cup of the water. You need to put a little bit salt into that, and afterward you are able to produce a hydrogen and oxygen, and it's very easy. So people have a feeling why we are making so big fuss with the production of hydrogen. But in reality, it's not so easy, and in reality, the problem is economic. And today we really need to make sure that what's possible from the technical point of view will be possible also and feasible from economical point of view. And as we discuss, the main keys for the cost reduction from our point of view is technology, because technology can, development of technology can decrease the price. The utilization, it means that we need to make sure that all the technologies are used as much as possible, and certainty and predictability. This is, let's say, definitely a big task for us, for government offices, to create something like a clean way ahead, which make the role for the investors and for the companies, for the producers and for the users easier. So if we can go to the next slide. In discussions, I found that sometimes there is a little bit of confusion between the people, because they have a feeling that the hydrogen, the renewable hydrogen, should be relatively cheap, that there are no big issues with the price. This is exactly as I mentioned in the previous slide, because the production of hydrogen is something like a black box. You have there the solar PVs, you have there electrolyzers, some tanks for storage, some tanks or cylinders for the transport, and at the end you need to have some, let's say, refilling stations or something for distribution of the hydrogen. And at the very beginning, you have a free renewable energy. So if as an input is a free energy, although the output should be, let's say, relatively cheap. But the problem is that the technology in the middle is very expensive, and we really need to work and to make our homeworks to make that technology as cheap as possible. So this is exactly what I said before, that we really need to do a lot of work on technology side to make all these technologies which are in the middle of that black box effective, cheap, and efficient. So this is the way how to decrease the price of the hydrogen. And if we go to the very last slide in my presentation, it's about three, let's say, competitive advantages of the Czech Republic, which we would like to use in our hydrogen strategy. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, we have a hydrogen network, which is relatively ready and which can be repurposed for the transport of hydrogen. We have highly developed research and industrial base, which we would like to use for development of hydrogen technologies. And we are trying to use our flexible approach, which will give us a chance to be flexible and in our reaction to all these, let's say, issues and topics which are popping up. So we would like to make the update of our hydrogen strategy, and hopefully by end of the year we should have our new hydrogen strategy ready, and we believe that this strategy will help to our industries, to our producers, to our users of the hydrogen to go ahead and increase the market share of the hydrogen in the Czech Republic. So that's all from my side, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Murvat, for providing us with an in-depth understanding of the green hydrogen landscape in the Czech Republic. There are one question from our side. So how does Czech Republic position itself within the European hydrogen economy? Specifically, Czech is also a very key part of the European hydrogen backbone. What's your comment?
Unfortunately, we are not leaders because definitely Germany or Netherlands are ahead of us. So we are trying really to keep the pace. As I said, we would like to use our advantages. The first advantage is to build that hydrogen network, which can be, let's say, source of hydrogen not only for us, but as I mentioned, also for Germany, because with these two connections, we are able to fill, let's say, two big parts of the Germany, because if you see the map of pipelines in the Germany, they are somehow split it, because one part is in the north, which could be connected to that connector in Saxony, and the second, which is going to west through Bavaria, could be connected to that Bavarian connector. So our, let's say, goal is really to keep the pace, is the leaders to be active in, let's say, the building of European hydrogen backbone. On the other hand, we are aware that Czech Republic will never ever be the big producer of renewable hydrogen because at the end we will be forced to import it. And we would like to do as much as possible in hydrogen technologies.
Thank you, Ms. Peter. Zach is not yet the leader, but is certainly the rising star in especially the Central Eastern Europe. We wish you the best for the hydrogen success. And now thank you. And our next destination is Australia, the global hydrogen hub and partner of international trade. Joining us now is Ms. Jennifer McKinley, General Manager, Europe and Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner at Austrade. Ms. McKinley, now the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak this afternoon. Well, look, we do indeed have very great ambitions about being a renewable energy superpower. If you could just switch to the next slide, please.
Sure, just 1 second.
Thanks. Great, so we'll just go to the next slide. Thank you. So look, Australia is a pretty small country with 26 million population, but we actually have the 12th largest economy in the world. We have a AAA credit rating and a very stable outlook by all three major rating agencies. The thing is that Australia is a really easy place to do business, and we're rated in the top 20 globally. And so that's why Australia is incredibly attractive for hydrogen investment and the hydro ecosystem that the Australian government is building. We've got great governance, we've got strong institutions and the rule of law, which leads to the low sovereign risk. So this makes Australia incredibly attractive and a stable market to invest in. Next slide, thanks. So Australia's advantages. Australia is currently one of the largest energy exporters in the world as the world transitions to net zero. Most of those exports will come from clean and renewable sources. Australia has an ambition to become a renewable energy superpower. So what gives Australia the capacity to realise this ambition, especially as it relates to producing hydrogen? While incentives and subsidies are a vital instrument to help kickstart the industry, Australia also has among the best natural advantages to produce low-cost renewable hydrogen in the world. And these include an abundance of land, it's a big place, with access to high-capacity solar and wind resources. We have experience in developing large-scale energy export projects such as LNG. We have an existing large-scale export infrastructure and ports that are co-located within regions capable of producing large-scale, cheap, renewable energy. And we've got established and reliable trade relationships with some of the largest potential hydrogen importers in Asia. Next slide, thanks. So 12 of Australia's top 15 export markets are located within Asia and Oceania and worth $326 billion. That's Australian dollars. And we have a number of FTAs that with these countries in that region. So unsurprisingly, the Asia-Pacific region is emerging as one of the key demand centres for future green hydrogen use. Australia offers proximity to these key markets and has established trading routes. And Australia also has a well-earned reputation for developing resource and energy export industries and supplying these markets already. Next slide, thanks. There are many parts of the global green hydrogen supply chain that need to reduce costs to make hydrogen cost competitive with alternative traditional energy vectors. Renewable energy is one of the main inputs for producing hydrogen. Whilst the cost of renewable energy has fallen dramatically over the past decade, further cost reductions will be required to improve green hydrogen's cost competitiveness. And one of the key advantages Australia has is our plentiful land for developing large-scale solar and wind projects. This, combined with some of the best solar and wind capacity rates in the world, and many locations where both wind and solar overlap, will enable us to provide lower cost renewable energy. According to Australia's scientific research organisation, CSIRO, solar generation costs are expected to fall by around 20% by 2030 and 45% by 2050. Similarly, onshore wind generation costs are expected to follow by 10% by 2030 and 20% by 2050. These cost reductions suggest Australia will become one of the cheapest producers of solar and wind energy in the world. Consequently, Australia is also likely to emerge as one of the cheapest green hydrogen producers in the world. And most importantly, Australia can do this at significant scale. Next slide, thanks. Australia was one of the first countries to develop a national hydrogen strategy in 2019. And a lot of other countries have been very quick to follow. And the world and industry landscape has really changed significantly in the space of just a few years. Now, a key pillar of Australia's strategy was adaptability. Given a changing world, Australia has realised we need to reassess our strategy and better align it to help our industry be more globally competitive. Australia's early stage development, the strategy, has helped spawn the largest pipeline of green hydrogen projects in the world, with a number already in operation or close to coming online. And so you're probably aware that in early 2022, Australia was actually the first country in the world to export liquid hydrogen. A demonstration liquefaction plant was built and liquid hydrogen was shipped from Victoria to Cabo, Japan. This project is now moving to the commercial phase with the support of the Japanese government. There are already projects blending renewable hydrogen into the natural gas network, which are assessing the impact of hydrogen on gas infrastructure and household appliances. Hydrogen highways for heavy transportation are also being built. Australia is also likely to become one of the largest demand markets for electrolysers. And here we have a great example of Fortescue Future Industry, which has realised this and is in the process of building an electrolyser gigafactory near Gladstone in Queensland. And in fact, all state and territory governments in Australia are strongly supporting and pursuing opportunities, I should say, to develop their own hydrogen industries. So for example, in South Australia, you have the South Australian government funding a 250 megawatt electrolyser and 200 megawatts of power generation in Port Bonython. The Queensland government has a $3.5 billion hydrogen fund. They can allocate funds to their state-owned energy generators, all of whom are active in developing hydrogen projects. Next slide, please. So the important thing to take away from this slide here is the piece about additionality. Australian state and territory governments have announced over 8 billion Australian dollars in funding for the hydrogen industry. And most recently, just earlier this month, the Australian government announced the Hydrogen Head Start program. The program will allocate 2 billion Australian dollars to provide revenue support to large-scale renewable hydrogen projects through competitive hydrogen production contracts. And this investment will accelerate development of Australia's hydrogen industry. It will catalyse clean energy industries and help Australia connect to new global hydrogen supply chains to take advantage of hydrogen's immense jobs and investment potential. The program will help bridge the commercial gap for early projects and put Australia on course for up to 1 gigawatt of electrolyser capacity by 2030 through 2 to 3 flagship projects. It's also worth mentioning the Australian Renewable Energy Agency, which is known as ARENA. It has provided more than $190 million through grants to support the hydrogen industry, initially funding research and development, and now providing grants for hydrogen production projects and use cases such as mobility applications. The Australian Government's Green Bank, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, has made available $300 million through Advancing Clean Hydrogen Fund to provide equity and also concessional debt. Next slide, please. Another key part of Australian strategy for hydrogen, and I'm not sure if you can see this slide well, but What it involves is the development of regional hydrogen hubs throughout Australia. Hydrogen hubs are regions where various producers, users, and potential exporters of hydrogen across industrial, transport, export, and energy markets are co-located. They will give our green hydrogen industry an early stage springboard to scale, which will help support other industrial sectors in regional Australia. The Regional Hydrogen Hub program has received strong funding support with $524 million from the federal government, and the funding has been allocated to 8 hubs. However, through support of additional funding from state and territory governments, there are now 11 hub locations under development in Australia, as you can see on the map here. Now, thanks for the next slide, thanks. Another really interesting aspect of the Australian strategy is the guarantee of origin. Green hydrogen customers need to be able to verify the carbon intensity of the hydrogen they're buying. So for this reason, another important piece of work Australia is focused on is the guarantee of origin scheme. Australia is working with international partners and local industry to design and develop a globally recognised guarantee of origin scheme for Australia. The scheme will support a future trade in clean hydrogen by informing customers about the emissions and other relevant attributes of the hydrogen they buy. Australia has released a consultation paper on the proposed scheme policy design and are currently holding industry trials to shape the scheme. The proposed scheme draws on our work with the International Partnership on Hydrogen and Fuel Cells in the Economy, known as IPHE. Through the IPHE, we are working with other countries on methodologies to determine the carbon emissions of hydrogen and its derivatives, transport and storage. Australia is planning to have a scheme operating by early 2024. Next slide, please. So most of the world's economies have established a pathway to net zero. However, not all countries have the means to produce enough renewable energy to support their own economy and populations. Australia is energy rich and is well placed to supply our planned surplus energy to other parts of the world. We have traditional energy export markets in North Asia, and this is likely to continue through hydrogen, with Japan and Korea being 2 of Australia's key export markets for hydrogen. Japan is targeting to expand ammonia fuel use to 3 million tonnes per year by 2030. Korea is targeting to import nearly 2 million tonnes per year of clean hydrogen by 2030. However, it is not only our traditional trading partners that are looking for hydrogen supply in Australia. Europe is also becoming a potential export market due to the rapid decarbonisation targets and large imports required. Studies have found that shipping cost is only marginal in the overall cost of hydrogen. Europe has set a target to import 10 million tonnes of hydrogen per year, by 2030. And that's a huge quantity of hydrogen, and it will take multiple exporting countries to meet this need. So if Australia can produce and export hydrogen in these timeframes, we will be well placed to supply partner countries like Germany and others that will have significant hydrogen import needs. Next slide, please. So Australia has been building partnerships with a number of countries. We have partnerships with 8 countries that feature cooperation on clean hydrogen, including 3 in this region with Germany, Netherlands and the UK. And with other major hydrogen markets, Japan, Korea, Singapore, India, and the USA. And we really value these agreements and are working with our partners to keep up the momentum. For example, the Australia-Germany Hydrogen Accord is already delivering results to build a hydrogen economy and develop international supply chains. The German and Australian governments jointly awarded 50 million Australian dollars and 40 million euros towards 4 projects, including hydrogen production electrolyser pilots. Next slide, thanks. Now, the next figure that's been cited by Bloomberg Finance is incredibly impressive, I think. Australia's hydrogen investment pipeline is 230 to 300 billion Australian dollars. So that's 140 to 180 billion euros. And that represents approximately 40% of all global renewable hydrogen projects announced to date. There are 140 active projects in Australia with electrolyser capacity of over 70 gigawatts required and over 130 gigawatts of renewable energy required. And these projects span the hydrogen supply chain and include hydrogen production, gas blending trials, transport trials, and storage projects. And this includes mega projects such as the 50 gigawatt Western Green Energy Hub and the 26 gigawatt Australian Renewable Energy Hub. Next slide, thanks. So look, that's just been a very, very quick roundup of where Australia is at. We're constantly looking to make progress, and progress is really what I want to underscore here. It's about continuing to move forward and evaluating the state of our hydrogen strategy and continuing to make this progress. So please do reach out to the Australian Trade and Investment Commission if you have any questions, particularly about investment. We are the Australian Federal Government's Trade and Investment Promotion Agency, and one of our key roles is to connect Australian business to the world on the one hand, and the world to Australian business and opportunity. And we can work with international companies interested in hydrogen in Australia and connect you with the opportunities and help you navigate the industry landscape. And we can connect you with project developers, industry, government stakeholders to find out more. So thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you, Ms. McKinley, for sharing Australia's ambition plan for large-scale renewable hydrogen and its investment opportunities. This presentation is so informative that almost all of our questions have been
I've answered them all.
sufficiently addressed. Australia is, as you mentioned, one of the first countries to announce its national hydrogen strategy has been serving as a beacon for other political peers around the world. Moving forward, we are witnessing a further united, collaborative Australia government, and with no doubt, we are going to see the Australia's further leapfrog. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And finally, our last but not least speaker today takes us to the beautiful nation of Mauritania. Please join me to welcome Ms. Assata Lam, Director General of the Mauritania Investment Promotion Agency. Ms. Lam, now the floor is yours.
Perfect. I hope you can see my screen well. First and foremost, thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Assata Lam. I'm the Director General of the Investment Promotion Agency of Mauritania, the government entity in charge of national and foreign direct investment. It's a real pleasure for me and my team to be joining you today to talk about our beautiful country and also the potential in the green hydrogen sector. So first and foremost, let me just present to you a quick video. I don't know if any of you have been to Mauritania before, so we will start with that to give you an idea of what to expect when we welcome you next.
At the crossroad of a 300 million market, with its privileged geographical position, Mauritania has direct access to Europe, MENA region, and sub-Saharan Africa. The Investment Promotion Agency of Mauritania, APIM, the government entity in charge of national and foreign investment, is a single window for investments in the country. APIM is a single window for investors, from business registration that takes 1 to 2 days to the completion of all administrative formalities. The investor is taken care of from A to Z in one place.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I wanted just to start with this quick video to showcase our beautiful country in the hope of welcoming you next to visit. So Mauritania is often described as one of our continent's best kept secrets. As I said, we are aware that it's a country that is sometimes not very well known. And the secret today, we are very glad to share with you all. In the hopes of, as I said, welcoming you soon to see for yourselves. So the Mauritanian government has made the development of national, private, and foreign direct investment a determining factor in his strategy for promoting strong, sustainable, and inclusive growth. His Excellency, the President of the Republic, Mr. Mohamed Ould Ghazouani, said on this subject in his commitment to the Mauritanian people, we wish to promote strong, sustainable, and inclusive growth driven by private sector that we want as a privileged partner and engine of growth. So our agency, as I said in the introduction, is really mandated to implement this vision with a strong private sector and also strong productive sectors. Mauritania has historically been known for strong extractive industries contributing to more than 25% of the GDP and close to 75% of our country's export. But really right now, our main mission is to diversify the economy with productive sectors such as agriculture, livestock, fisheries that the country has been really blessed with in terms of natural resources, but also geared towards green transition, renewable energies, and including green hydrogen. So this is on this slide just a quick glimpse, nutshell of the country's macro insight. So we, as I said, we are a country located in West Africa at the crossroad between the Arab world, the MENA region, Europe, and Sub-Saharan Africa, with a population of 4.6 million and a GDP as of 2021 of around 10 billion USD. So for the past couple of years, the government has been working really hard to stabilize the micro conditions of the country, international partnering for the country to be able to international market with global example lending conditions. Just to give you a quick example in terms of restructuring of the debt to decrease the ratio debt to GDP 56%, 52% in 2022. In terms of FDI flows, they increased by 10% in 2020. So in the video, we mentioned the privileged position of the country. It has made a lot of advantages, especially when you talk about especially export transportation. As I said, we have direct access to the Atlantic Ocean. Mauritania is really located at the door of Africa, so easy access to the African markets. Just to give you a quick description of our agency, our main mission is threefold. First, investment promotion. So we work in attracting potential investors, generating interest with targeted sectors that I introduced before, and present to them business opportunities with high economic value. Favorable institutional framework. We have our agency, the single window. The president has, as I said, made the commitment to have the private sector at the center stage of his mandates. We created a high investment council that led by the president himself. He sits at the meetings and he really spearheads all the reforms that are undertaken on the various sectors, including green hydrogen, and follows the development as it goes. We have also an interministerial committee that oversees the business climate reforms in the country. Our agency oversees the investment code, which is the law in charge of all the investment in different sectors in the country, namely the productive sectors, agriculture, life fisheries, etc. For the extractive industries and specifically the new sectors that are currently being developed, such as green hydrogen, there are separate codes such as a mining code, the hydrocarbon code, and currently a green hydrogen code that is being developed. I will tell you more about it later on. And finally, investment opportunities that is currently being developed by the agency. So I'll first talk about the hydrogen production potential in Mauritania. Second of all, I will talk about the investment opportunities in green hydrogen, and finally, the incentives for investors. So firstly, hydrogen production potential. Access to water resources is a paramount hydrogen production process. Mauritania, with its unique coastal location, offers a viable solution through the desalination of Atlantic Ocean water. This approach ensures a consistent and feasible water supply for electrolysis, thereby enabling the initial production of green hydrogen in coastal regions and minimizing water transportation. In our analysis, we would the export potentially to Europe make it very highly competitive compared to local production costs. The growth objectives for the green hydrogen to countries in economic and social development, realistic target achieving 2050. To hydrogen transportation. Transporting hydrogen by sea requires additional consideration and cost for transformation and transport. Similarly, ammonia export entails transportation expenses. However, the cost of delivering Mauritanian hydrogen or ammonia to Europe is expected to be on par with the lower than local production costs, making it an attractive and economically viable option. So now moving on to investment opportunities in green hydrogen. This sector presents promising prospects for investment, not only in hydrogen production and infrastructure, but also in the broader ecosystem that surrounds it. Mauritania, as I said, well positioned to leverage green hydrogen production. The country has developed a comprehensive green hydrogen strategy, which is divided into three distinct phases. We have short, medium, and long term. So during the short-term phase that spans from today to 2030, Mauritania's primary focus is on enhancing access to clean water and electricity for its population and industries. Additionally, the country aims to capture a substantial market share in the export of low-carbon hydrogen and ammonia. We plan to initiate feasibility studies for hydrogen derivatives, such as green steel, and establish the production of ammonium nitrate to support the growth of our mining industry. In the medium term, from 2030 to 2040, we aspire to become one of the most advanced African countries when it comes to providing affordable, clean water and electricity to the citizens. This period will witness the establishment of the first industrial units of green steel production, along with an increased focus on exporting green hydrogen and ammonia. And finally, looking towards the long term, by 2050, Mauritania aims to achieve levels of public access to clean water and decarbonized electricity that are comparable to the most advanced countries worldwide. The country also aims to strengthen its position as a leading global exporter of green hydrogen and ammonia by further accelerating green steel exports. To realize these goals, there are several investment opportunities available in the green hydrogen sector and its associated infrastructure. First of all, one important aspect is the development of renewable electricity capacity. Renewable electricity is essential for electrolysis, as you know, the process through which hydrogen is produced from pure water. Mauritania has set ambitious targets, including reaching 13 gigawatts of hybrid renewable electricity capacity by 2030, 36 gigawatts by 2040, and 70 gigawatts by 2050. Feasibility studies and environmental impact assessments for renewable energy infrastructure have already commenced, and the engineering, procurement, and construction of renewable electricity installation will begin in 2024, by next year. Another significant area for investment is desalinated water production. Desalinated water is central for hydrogen production through electrolysis, and Mauritania aims to establish seawater desalination units to meet the increasing demand for clean water. The country has set production goals of 39 million cubic meters per year by 2030, 104 million cubic meters per year by 2040, and close to 230 million cubic meters per year by 2050. The National Water Plan will identify water-stressed areas, quantify the needs, and outline the necessary infrastructure and financing requirements. In terms of hydrogen and ammonia production, the potential for green hydrogen production through using renewable energy sources such as wind and solar is very clear. The country has set to export close to 1.2 million tons of green hydrogen in 2030, close to 3 million tons in 2040 and more than 4 million by 2050. When converted to ammonia, the volume gets to 7 million in 2030, close to 16 million tons in 2040, and close to 24 million tons in 2050. These objectives were calculated based on market analysis and geographic proximity, considering the demand and imports of green hydrogen in major importing markets. Additionally, Mauritania's hydrogen potential and iron ore reserves position it as a potential producer of decarbonized steel. The country aims to establish a green steel industry by constructing pelletizing plants, steel mills, and decarbonizing the mining process. The production goals for Mauritania are set to 4.3 million tons per year. Okay, before talking about the investment ecosystem, just a glimpse of the transportation of green hydrogen by sea. Okay, no. So yeah, so we already talked about it. I'll just give you an example of the current project that we are currently developing. We have 4 of them amounting close to $100 billion, including major players such as CWP, Total Energies, BP, and the last one with Conjuncta. Finally, incentives for investors. The Mauritanian government has taken several measures to facilitate investment in the green hydrogen sector. These measures include fiscal and regulatory benefits, especially tailored for green hydrogen projects. Investors can benefit from these incentives, which aim to create a favorable business environment to develop this sector. Access to financing and the promotion of public-private partnerships are a key component of our strategy to attract investment. We definitely recognize the importance of providing financial support to investors and fostering collaboration between public and private entities. This approach encourages investment in the green hydrogen sector projects and ensures the availability of necessary resources for the successful implementation. We are currently, as I said, working on the first green hydrogen investment code in the world, which also will strengthen our position as a market leader in the area. In terms of the legal framework that is under discussion, it will be based mostly on 3 phases of agreement with partners. The first stage is the MOU phase, which spans from 6 to 9 months. And for this first MOU, the idea is to have a screening study of for the area in terms of resource measurements, environmental screening, and rough technical and economical assessment with a rough planning. Second of all, framework agreement, which is the second phase, a more detailed MOU that goes from 9 to 12 months. And in this MOU, we give more visibility about the right and obligation of developer and also on the government side. It allows the investor, the entity, to do the pre-feasibility and advanced feasibility study. And it's at this stage also that we can embark on negotiation of the final agreement. And finally, the third phase is the Global Convention, which is the final step of the agreement to oversee the FEED, funding, construction, operation, and also decommission. Some implementation instrument could be necessary to treat specific areas like supply of water, electricity to grids, and other subjects which may appear later. To conclude, the development of Mauritania's hydrogen potential, as we said, will bring about a multitude of benefits. It will enable the decarbonization of industries, increase the value added, and diversify the country's industrial landscape. Within this context, 5 sectors have been identified for potential hydrogen conversion: mining, heavy mobility, agriculture, fishing, and electricity production. These sectors alone present a combined demand of approximately 250,000 metric tons of hydrogen, paving the way for a thriving hydrogen market. Hence, the hydrogen production potential in Mauritania holds tremendous economic competitiveness. making it a promising avenue for investment. Its development will play a vital role in the country's decarbonization efforts and contribute to its industrial growth. I will finish with this slide, which gives you an idea of really the plan that the country is leaning towards. Over the next 30 years, Mauritania's energy ecosystem would change from black to gray to blue and green. This is really a strategy that we are committed to, and all the stakeholders in the public sector are working very hard towards it. So to conclude, we really welcome each and every one of you to visit us, and I will leave my contacts and the contacts of my team to Molly and Leaders Associate for you to reach out to us in case you have any question. Thank you so much for your attention, and very sorry once again for all the internet and connectivity issues. Over to you, Molly.
Thank you, Ms. Lam, for introducing us to Mauritania, this very, very beautiful nation. And thank you for your very kind address amid these difficulties. Mauritania may still be a developing economy with some limitation in infrastructure, but I believe together, along with international support, we can do more as a unit. And APIM is the bridge. Regarding the green hydrogen sector, I believe for many international developers, Mauritania is already a renowned name, attracting big companies such as CWP, BP, Total Energy, Mazda. So in your mind, what kind of opportunities, like immediate opportunities or specific investment opportunities, would available for more international green hydrogen players? Ms. Lam?
Sorry, yes. Can you please repeat the question, please? I think we got cut a bit.
Yes, so the question is, with Mauritania's significant ambition and potential for green hydrogen, we believe there will be more international investors coming on board. So what do you think are the specific investment opportunities or immediate investment opportunities that would be available to international players?
Sure, thank you so much. As I presented in the PowerPoint, I think the significant ambition for green hydrogen in Mauritania, coupled with the involvement of international investors like BP, Total Energies, introduced earlier, for example, currently under development amounting close to $100 billion and are really said to be major products for the green hydrogen production and fulfillment of the demand for the region and Europe. It has created a wealth of investment in the country between bank and those actors that are working closely with us to help us develop our ecosystem and enabling environment to welcome the investors. So, to outline some specific areas where investors can actively participate and contribute to the development of this promising industry, I can maybe talk about a couple. First of all, infrastructure development, as I said, is one of the key investment opportunities that lie in establishing of infrastructure for green hydrogen production, storage, and distribution. This includes the construction of electrolysis plants, desalination facilities, hydrogen purification and compression units, as well as storage and transportation infrastructure. So investing in these critical components would not only support the growth of the green hydrogen sector in Mauritania, but also facilitate the export of green hydrogen and its derivatives to the international market. So this is first. Second of all, we talked about renewable energy projects. Green hydrogen production heavily relies on renewable energy sources. Investing in renewable energy projects in Mauritania presents an excellent opportunity. This encompasses the development of solar and wind farms, for example, as well as associated transmission infrastructure to ensure a consistent and sustainable energy supply for electrolysis. Third, R&D. Green hydrogen is a new sector. I know there is a lot of buzz from the past years. Everybody wants the spec and the horizon is very long term. So I think R&D is definitely an area not to take for granted. The advancement of this sector, the green hydrogen technologies and processes require ongoing research and development efforts. Investors can participate in funding research initiatives and collaborative projects aimed at enhancing electrolysis efficiency, exploring new hydrogen production methods, improving desalination techniques, and optimizing the integration of renewable energy sources. I think it goes also hand in hand with technology transfer and knowledge sharing. So just to conclude, I think, as I said, infrastructure development, we talk about green hydrogen as a goal, but we need also to keep in mind the value chain around it. And I think those really are important to focus on: infrastructure, the renewable energy projects, R&D, technology transfer, and also partnerships around those elements in order to be stronger and better equipped together.
Thank you, Ms. Lam, for your very kind and informative address. Also, we humbly would like to see you in our physical event, Investing in Green Hydrogen 2023 this year in London, UK, to meet all of the global investors and developers face to face. With regards to today's video and slides, we will share with all participants next Monday, along with a brief recap. Should you have any other questions, please feel free to drop me an email at molly@leaderassociates.com. Once again, today's virtual session is part of our physical event, Investing in Green Hydrogen 2023, a global platform that unites the entire hydrogen value chain. To be taking place in London, UK, this September the 14th to 15th, with over 1,500 participants from across 55 countries, including investors, project developers, development banks, financiers, and supply chain stakeholders. We look forward to meeting you in person. Thank you all for being part of the Impact webinar, Accelerating Global Hydrogen Production Competency Strategies for Progress. We look forward to seeing you in future endeavors. Thank you.